Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Laura Patterson. Laura is the president of VisionEdge Marketing. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
It's fantastic to have you on the show today. I'm on the road. I'm back in San Diego right now, back in my hometown of San Diego for the holidays. So, it's fantastic that we're still able to connect, even though I'm moving around. It's one of the most brilliant parts, I think, of getting to host a podcast. And today we are going to be talking about the 5 things that best-in-class marketers do better than their peers, which I think is going to make for some fantastic content. But of course, Laura, before we get into today's topic, maybe you can tell our listeners a little about yourself, VisionEdge Marketing, and what you and your team are up to these days.
Wonderful. So VisionEdge Marketing is located here in Austin. By the way, I love San Diego. I think it's a remarkable city. It's nice to live in Austin, Texas, too. We founded the company in 1999, so we're going on 19 years. And we started on the premise of being a data-driven, metrics-based, outcome-oriented, customer-centric, strategic and product marketing company. That's really was the impetus. And when we started with that premise, that was all very, very new. Of course, today everyone is talking about how important it is to be data to insights driven and have strong analytical muscle, to be outcome oriented and customer centric. So these are all very common buzzwords today. They weren't in 1999, and it's exciting to see that the world and us have sort of met each other, so to speak. And so that's where we began, and it's really our focus is to help companies use the ingredients of insights and measurement, performance management, processes to drive growth, create value, and improve performance.
Absolutely. And, and it's so fantastic to have someone on the show that's sort of had an eye for tracking these metrics, these numbers, for so long. I mean, you and your team have kind of this long-term, ongoing marketing performance benchmark study. Am I on point with that?
You are, and it started in 2001, and we've been really, really fortunate to have great partners over the years to help keep the momentum going, and as a result, we've been able to collect some really interesting longitudinal data, so that's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. One of the reasons that you and I were able to connect in the first place. So, we're going to be, of course, referencing some of that data that you have as we talk about these 5 things that best-in-class marketers do better than their peers. So I don't want to get ahead of today's topic, but Laura, I got the sense that today we're going to be starting just real briefly talking about the pressure for marketers to be able to sort of connect the dots between the work of marketing and the value to the actual business. So sort of take it away from there.
I'd be happy to. And I think that it's always helpful to have context. So, Jonathan, some other data out there that kind of is important around what we're going to share. So there was a study done by KPMG not very long ago, and it was really talking about what the expectations are of the board, of the CEO. And one of the things that came out of that is that 90% of the organizations are really expecting the CEO to move the organization to growth. And so everyone's been talking about that. 2018 is the mantra is growth. The mandate is to grow. Mm-hmm. And research by Deloitte and the CMO Council kind of following that said, 70% of these CEOs expect the CMO to actually lead this revenue growth charge, to be at the forefront of that. Wow. Unfortunately, at the same time, a Forbes study came out and said, they may expect it, but CEOs don't have a lot of faith in their CMOs because they. So you've got this sort of dichotomy. There's an expectation but lack of faith because they're still struggling to really show how they are helping the organization realize the results, right? So being able to make those connections. And so one of the things that happened about a year ago is the tenure of CMOs began to kind of decline again. And so there's just this whole sort of, storm of things occurring at the same time. This force, growth force that's occurring, this whole momentum around growth, the fact that the CMOs need to really take the lead, and at the same time, some challenges that they're having. So the pressure is really on them. And you might have seen the recent Forrester study that predicted that CMOs may even be eclipsed by chief growth officers. So CMOs actually are at risk, and they know they're at risk. So let's talk about what some of them are doing really well, and then in the area of being able to connect the dots and where the challenges are, and then some of the other things that we see happening as a result of this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
was that good context?
Oh my goodness, that's a brilliant context. I think you're speaking definitely our audience's language right now. I think you I think you had their curiosity, and now you have their interest. CMOs may be at risk. Okay, let's take it away from there.
So this study that we're going to talk about from last year, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do it again next year. As I said, it's been going on since 2001. It's an online study, and this year we had what we would say over 400 qualified study participants. Lots and lots more than that, but we're really, really careful about quarantining data that doesn't seem like it's coming from legitimate sources. So 30% of the participants reflected the C-suite, so I think that's important to know. That would be CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and the presidents of companies. We had really great representation of all sizes, all industries, from B2B and B2C around the world. And what's interesting, there's nothing statistically significant in the data about those nuances. It's all pretty much the same, regardless of where they're located, how big they are, and what kind of industry they are in. And the results of this study are actually projectable, so between 95% plus or minus 4.75%. So that's really very, very important to know. We're not just making stuff up. It's actually has really valuable data that can be applied to everyone. So as we're speaking here, it's not like you say, that doesn't mean me. It really does mean just about everybody. And one of the other things that's interesting is when we're starting talking about the best-in-class marketers and how we characterize them, is they don't really have anything different about their budget. They have the same percentage of budget as the big guys, the small guys, anywhere. So it's not about money. And I think that's a really important thing, because it's really easy for us to say, well, that's because they have more money than we do. And I just want to let people know that that's not really true at all.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of setup. So what have we learned? We've been tracking the data for a very long time, and we kind of just decided to go 10 years back in the data for this report just to see what the trends were. And what we noticed, and a very critical question we ask and have asked every year is, what grade the C-suite gives their marketing organization for their ability to prove marketing's value, impact, and contribution to the business. And we ask them to grade them. We use a very traditional scale, 90 to 100 for an A, 80 to 89 for a B, 70 to 79 for C, and then 69 or less. And that's how we organize all of the data, and that's how we characterize the groups. And what's been interesting is that it's been pretty consistent that about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 marketing organizations earn this A. That's not that hasn't changed. In a decade, that hasn't changed. And so that's a little, disappointing to see that the ranks of the best in class are not increasing. Mm-hmm. The next group is a very large group, and they're about 40%. And the next group, which are the folks that are lagging, that's a group we're kind of concerned about because it's growing. It's also about 40%. So, and climbing, and that is a little unnerving, considering how much emphasis has been placed on data, on analytics, on metrics, on process, on performance management, and on marketing technology over the last few years. So you would expect to see that those things would be beginning to have an impact, and we would see the best-in-class group increasing and the lagging group declining, right?
Yeah.
That would be an expectation. And so that was a hypothesis that we went into this year's study, that those things were beginning to pay off. And unfortunately, that was not proven.
The absolute opposite was proven.
Yeah.
That the people who are doing it well has remained sort of static and stagnant, and despite this focus that you're talking about, the people who are doing it poorly has actually increased. And this was kind of a point that you and I had talked about. I had the opportunity to talk to you before we recorded a few weeks ago, and I had mentioned there's so many people out there with a voice now. There's so many people that are vying for your attention. They're trying to get eyeballs on the page, clicks to the website, and so they're producing an insane amount of content, and we have all these incredible tools and resources at our disposal. But despite the fact that everyone has a voice, not everyone is right. Not everyone knows what they're doing or what they're talking about, and now they're pumping out misinformation. So there's all this information, but so much of it is bad at the same time. Yes.
Well, that is what happens in all industries, and we see that everywhere. So that's true. You're exactly right. So what we decided we would do is, okay, maybe let's go with the assumption that it's not the MarTech, all right? Because most companies are investing a significant portion of their dollars, anywhere from 15 to 30% of their marketing budget is being allocated to MarTech these days. Mm-hmm. Pretty consistently. There's been a lot of data around that. In fact, I think there's a recent study done by Gartner that's talking about how the marketing spend is being allocated, and that would be if people are interested in learning more about that. So we said, okay, we have been talking about these groups of marketers for quite a while, and we have created personas for them. And so these best-in-class marketers, we were able years ago to characterize them as value creators. And these are really a group of marketers who focus on creating value for our customers and the business, and connecting the work of marketing and the investments of marketing to very specific quantifiable business outcomes. The middle of the pack, those 40% of marketers, we call those the sales enablers. And they see their primary role as being in service to the sales team. And I think this is an important distinction between the value creators and the sales enablers. The value creators are still very partnered with the sales organization, but they see them as partners. They collaborate together. In fact, marketing oftentimes is taking the lead, particularly strategically. In the sales enablers, it's a different kind of relationship in that the sales enablers are servicing the sales organization as opposed to collaborating with them. And so it is a nuance, but it's really important because they see their customer as the sales team. Yeah. And that's a little bit different orientation and a nuance that's important to distinguish between value creators and the sales enablers. That last group, that laggard group, those are campaign producers. And these folks are really, really good at the work of marketing. And they still do a lot of measurement and they use a lot of data, but they kind of see themselves as a service provider. They kind of operate like an internal organization or internal agency to the team, and it's all about kind of producing on demand, right? So it's not to belittle anyone in that organization because they're really very valuable and they're very, very talented, but they tend to be specialized into key areas that they know how to do well. They don't think in the big picture about how they're contributing to the overall business outcomes because they're in their roles of being producers. Mm-hmm. And so that's an important thing to know about them.
Interesting. So we've got sort of these three categories. You've got the upper echelon value creators, below that the sales enablers, and sort of slightly below that the campaign producers. Each one, like you said, do certain things well, but you want to find yourself in this like sort of value creators segment, the ones that are collaborating with your sales, not just enabling, and not just being so hyper specialized in terms of producing marketing campaigns that you've lost sight of the bigger picture. So if it's not, as you mentioned, a question of size, budget, or industry, across the almost 20 years of studies that you've done, but it does consistently come down to 5 capabilities that, again, these best-in-class marketers do better than their peers. let's talk about it. What are we talking about, Laura?
Okay, I want to talk about those, and then we'll come back around to how does that translate into things that matter to the C-suite, because I think that's going to be important too. So let's talk about these 5 things. The first and foremost is what we call business acumen. And this is an interesting thing, because the CMO of Juniper Networks recently talked about this in an article he wrote, as saying that marketers need to be business people first, and we've been saying that for years in this research, and we capture that in business acumen. And this is actually being able to understand the business in its entirety and to exercise really good judgment, because you are connected to the business. As opposed to thinking about marketing, you're thinking about the business. And value creators, they still have opportunities to grow here, but on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of being able to demonstrate really good business acumen, they score like a 7.1. And that doesn't seem like a really good grade. I mean, if your kids came home with a 70 out of 100, you probably wouldn't be, breaking out the champagne. But if you compare that to sales enablers, they get like 6.5, and campaign producers, they get like a 5.4. So that's a failing grade, right? And you would be really disappointed in that. So that's the number one thing. So all marketers can get better at that. This does not take technology. This doesn't take any of that. This is just about investing in understanding your company, your competitors, your customers, your market, good old basic, business, skills, right?
Yep.
Listening to what's going on when the leadership team is talking about their challenges and their opportunities. I'm still amazed sometimes when I work with marketing organizations, some marketing organizations, I'll say, who are your top 20 customers? What products do you sell to them? What's your opportunity for growth with them? What is your strategy for increasing your footprint within each of those businesses? What's your current share of wallet? Questions like that, and it's like deer in the headlights, right? And same thing when talking about market segments and market opportunities. So really, every marketing person should know that. The second thing is they really do know how to select the right metrics. And there is a formula to selecting the right metrics. And this is related to data, and metrics take data, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So value creators are much better at picking and selecting metrics that matter to the C-suite. And much better mastery at selecting the right metrics. And they are able to make their metrics form what we call and have trademarked as metrics chains. These are impact to value metrics chains. So the measures that they select and the metrics that they use form a chain that goes from the work of marketing to the results that marketing affects. And so they can use that, and then that allows them to really understand what data they have to hone in on, whether that's customer data or competitive data or market data, performance data. It's all kind of becomes much clearer because they can see exactly what's going to be salient. And that's often because they've done a really good job in their planning. Their plan is different. Their plans are structured in such a way as they have this hierarchy kind of built in. So a lot of marketers build plans. Almost every marketing organization has a plan, whether that's in PowerPoint or in Excel or some other document. The challenge is often that it's really just a list of things that marketing is going to do, when they're going to do it, and how much it's going to cost. And that's not really a plan, right? I mean, that's kind of interesting. I mean, my husband's in construction, so I often talk about the difference between the list of materials that you're going to need and when you're going to need them and how much they're going to cost in constructing a home, as opposed to the actual real blueprint of what that house is going to look like and what the picture is going to be at the end and how it's going to sit on the site and a bunch of different things, right, that go into the blueprint. So the fourth thing, so the first three, acumen, metrics, and the chains, the fourth thing is they are willing, the best-in-class marketers, the value creators, are willing to put a stake in the ground and set a performance target that they think is going to be the number they have to reach or achieve in order to move the dial for the business. So,
but Laura, if you have a target, that means there's the possibility of failure. I don't know about that.
That's true. That is true. And it's not a revenue target because we don't market to buckets of revenue. We market to customers, whether those are new customers or existing customers. That's what marketing does. We don't market to buckets of revenue. We are responsible. We are the only organization with the word market in our title. Therefore, we are supposed to know the market, and the market is comprised of an ecosystem that includes partners, competitors, and customers. Mm-hmm. And so that's our job, is to know those. And 80% of value creators can have performance targets for all of their marketing objectives and programs, and they're almost all outcome based, whereas like campaign producers, maybe only 52% of them. And back to those metric chains, kind of similar. 96 of the value creators, which is that very small group, of them, only 58 of them actually use metrics chains, right? But if you compare that to the sales enablers, which were 167 sales enablers out of that over 400, mm-hmm. only 60 of them use metrics chains, and only 55 of the campaign producers, which is the rest of the group, which is 160, right, use chains. So that means that only 41% of all marketing organizations can produce those metrics chains. That's why we're being challenged by the C-suite. Mm. Because if you don't have the metrics chains, which often incorporate these performance targets, then you can't get to the last ingredient, which is dashboards. Because you can't make good dashboards without performance targets and metrics chains. Yes, you can click on the button in a marketing tech tool and produce a visual report of the data in that tool. You can do that, but that's not the same thing as a performance management dashboard. And this is one of the things that best-in-class marketing organizations, the value creators, are really superior at doing. And their dashboards do three things that almost none of the other groups' dashboards do. They can monitor and measure marketing's objectives as they are producing results to the outcomes. They can analyze the performance of the campaigns and other marketing activities, and they can track their marketing metrics, the key performance indicators that are going to tell them whether they're on track in real time. This allows them to make course adjustments, mitigate risk, and facilitate better decisions. So those are the 5 things in a nutshell.
Perfect. And so, Laura, I know we wanted to revisit very quickly after we went through sort of the 5 things that the best-in-class marketers do better than their peers. Again, we've got the business acumen. They select the right metrics. They have their metrics chains. They set performance targets, and they have these performance management dashboards. But why does that all matter to the C-suite? I know we wanted to wrap it up and bring it back to that last question.
Well, I think what matters is if you can do these things, does it make a difference to the business? And what we ask and look at in this data is the business results for these organizations, and then compare that to the business results produced by each of the personas. And so we look at things like revenue growth, marketing contribution to the pipeline, the win rate, the share of wallet, customer retention, the ability to acquire new customers, the increase in the inquiry rate, the ability to improve customer loyalty, and the ability to generate new opportunities. And with the exception of win rate, which I'm going to come back to in a moment, value creators are much better in every single one of those. So things that might fall into the traditional camp of sales enablers and campaign producers, right? Still, the value creators are better at those things, even though that's not their area of focus. So that shows you, stepping back and having these capabilities will help you even address the things that campaign producers and sales enablers tend to focus on myopically. Mm-hmm. So it will just automatically, the halo of that. Now, win rate, interestingly enough, none of them do very well on affecting. Those value creators are about exactly the same as their other as their counterparts, as their colleagues. And I think that has a lot to do with the sales organization, right? Because who's really closing the deal. So I'm not really surprised by that, but it's interesting that as marketing gets further and further into the relationship with the customer and the responsibility of moving those opportunities closer to the close, it will be interesting to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. And so again, we've been talking with Laura Patterson. Laura, you're clearly an expert in this area. You've been doing research for decades, tracking metrics, and I really appreciate you sort of sharing some of the lessons that you've learned from this from this incredible study you've been doing. And I know you could continue to talk about best-in-class marketers and value creators, and I want to continue to talk to you about it. If any of our listeners are interested in possibly following up about today's topic, if they want to learn a little bit more about VisionEdge Marketing, or they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Well, I hope they'll come visit us on our website, which is VisionEdgeMarketing.com, because we have a tremendous amount of content and resources there. We really want to see every marketing organization join the ranks of the best in class, and for the best in class to continue, on their journey. So we have a lot of content there. I'm always receptive to receiving an email or a LinkedIn invite. So my email is Laura P for Patterson at VisionEdgeMarketing.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And anyone can reach out to me there, and that's just on LinkedIn, and it's Laura Patterson VEM. Happy to follow folks on Twitter and other places, but those are probably the first two places to start to connect.
Perfect. Well, Laura, thank you again so much for your time and your expertise today. It really was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.